something a little bit.
Start.
Hold on, I got to do just a quick intro. All right, we're going to switch it up a little bit, and we're just going to discuss some, some current events, some stuff that's going on. And so I got Flint. He is the CEO and founder of TruckSpy, and I got Matt. He is the COO. It reminds me of the thing where like we did our first episode when Matt was here. That was a good one, I think. And then on top of that, we were hanging out at F3 at the bar where we were just talking trucking. That was a good one. And so it's like, great, things that we enjoy doing that seems to work. So like that's what we're going to do. And I want to kick it off with this California. It's an article from Overdrive. It's California pre-2010 engine ban takes into effect. Okay. So if you are totally new and you haven't heard about this at all, essentially that at the start of 2023, I'm reading this from the article, all trucks with 2009 and older engines are prohibited in the state of California. And Matt, as our California TruckSpy resident, what's your opinion? I can elaborate really quick before you answer.
First take. First take is there's just, if California can ban it, they will. So, that's the thing. Like they love to find anything they can ban, and that's what they go for.
Right. And on top of that, I think the EPA passed some new particulate emissions to requirements for like 2027 and newer trucks. So, obviously it seems like they're aggressively paving the way for the Tesla semi-truck to be extremely popular, I guess. But the main reason is they're trying to cut down on particulate matter. And so they're okay if you have an older truck, but the engine has to be a newer truck. And I don't know if this article breaks it down, but they've been slowly upping the requirements over the last few years. So it's like in 2010, essentially a few years ago, it was like your truck had to have a 2012 diesel particulate filter, and then they required a little bit more. So you can have older trucks, you can't essentially remove the particulate filter from it, and of course that's the part that always clogs and always causes truckers problems. So it's an unfortunate reality that it seems like the cost of doing business in California is ever increasing. And then all these residents like Matt, they seem to be wondering, why is everything so expensive? Yes, sir.
Alex, I'm curious though, does this only ban me from owning one of these trucks if I'm a trucking company domiciled in California, or as a trucking company in, let's say, Arizona, Texas, pick another state, can I now no longer enter the state of California?
From what I've read, okay, they are tasking the DMV to revoke all registrations to vehicles with an engine older than 2010.
So then it only impacts you if you're registered in California.
No. But on top of that, they won't let you in if you're an outside carrier as well. So it's both. The only exception that I read, the only one, is if you do less than 1,000 miles a year. That's it. That's the only exception, 1,000 miles a year. So all outside motor carriers cannot go to California if their truck is older than 2010. And everybody that's in the state, you will no longer be able to re-register your truck. So it seems like an overstep. This is the part that I don't understand. How does a state control what another state like motor carrier does? I thought this seems like they're stepping on the toes of the federal government. Flint, am I wrong?
Yeah, that's kind of what it sounds like to me. I wonder how they're going to enforce that, right? Like,
that doesn't sound like California. That just doesn't. It's basically becoming its own country at this point. But
what's the old saying, right? If it moves, tax it, and if it keeps regulate it. Like, man, California is crazy. It's like, it's like communism.
Right. Yeah, that's CARB, right? That's the whole CARB, California Air Resource Board. This is Air Resource Board. That's their bright ideas. Let's just make it really hard. And apparently it affects, according to the landline, Overdrive, sorry, California. Yeah, apparently it affects 76,000 trucks in the state of California, I think is what it says. Or because I've seen obviously mixed results. It says 75,951 unique VINs for 2007 to 2009 model year. So if they're getting those unique VINs, then it seems like, just residents of California love high prices. So good stuff.
Get ready for higher prices. Right.
Speaking of higher prices, Flint, I know you had an article about fuel. What do you got? What do you want to talk about?
Yeah. So I thought it was interesting. I saw this article in Landline about Suncor. So Suncor owns one refinery in Denver. and they shut it down because they said, well, we got a deep freeze in Denver. I think we all remember this big winter event, like roughly Christmas, that made all the flights get screwed up and whatnot. They said, well, our refinery got too cold, damaged some equipment, so we better shut it down. Um, I wonder, like, if we have a refinery in Denver, how do we not? It'd be different if it was like Houston and it got down to like -20, right? But we're in Denver. How do we not expect we're going to have some cold freaking weather in Denver? So why do we not design a refinery appropriately? Look, the other thing I think is really interesting, in the refinery business is like very similar to like meat packers, right? There's like a few industries that kind of have this what's called a natural monopoly, and so Suncor. It's funny. Suncor owns a refinery. They also own the pipelines. Most of the pipelines in Colorado. They also market and transport most of the petroleum products in Colorado. So I always wonder when I see this news, like, all right, Suncor's got the only refinery in Colorado. There's 7 times the refining capacity in Oklahoma, 2 times the refining capacity in Wyoming. Sometimes are these things kind of like, hey, it would be convenient if we shut that refinery down because of this deep freeze. Pipeline traffic's been a little slow. Like, actually, based on the market conditions, we can probably make more money trading and transporting these products than we can actually making these products, right? I always kind of wonder that.
Interesting. Yeah, that's right. Because right here on the article it says Suncor's website says the Commerce City refinery processes approximately 98,000 barrels per day. And so, yeah, and I know, Flint, you talked to Greg Duhane from TA, and he said there was generally no shortage, right? Because obviously fuel shortage, it was like probably peak fear a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
25 days of supply left. OMG, right? It's like that whole thing. And so and I know Greg explained that sometimes the refinery occasionally does have to shut down. But your question here, initially, the motives, right? It's like, maybe they shut down because it makes more sense for them to make money somewhere else, right? That's kind of the question.
Well, it may be. I mean, I'm just guessing, right? Like, this is kind of how natural monopolies tend to work. I mean, I don't have any proof of that, but I think back to Greg's point, right? Like, generally, I think demand has softened for refined petroleum products over the last few weeks as general economic conditions start to deteriorate a little bit from where we were a few months ago. I mean, it's not a new thing for refineries to shut down, right? I mean, refineries shut down all the time for scheduled maintenance, rebuild equipment, whatever it is. I just think it's interesting that all these things kind of demand's down. Suncor kind of has a natural monopoly in Colorado. Refinery goes offline. It just seems kind of interesting to me, right? And obviously this is going to result in higher prices. Like, that refinery mostly supplies Metro Denver, and so now you got to ship in refined products from Oklahoma, Wyoming, possibly Texas, other states. So obviously, if you're in Colorado, you're going to see higher prices. So, if you're driving through Colorado as a truck driver, perhaps go ahead and get on through Colorado before you fill that tank up, right?
Right. Fill up in Wyoming and then drive through, and then
Fill up in Oklahoma, right?
So, and they did mention right here in the article, the latest weekly fuel reports released on January 2nd show a decline in average diesel prices within the Rocky Mountain region, which includes Colorado. So it looks like the fuel hasn't, maybe it'll take some time to start to really affect the prices. But it is interesting. Why declare a state of emergency? It's like, my goodness, like, what did the guy do? Suncor CEO call the governor and be like, "Hey, bud, like, let's just declare a quick state of emergency." Matt, what's your opinion on this?
Yeah.
Well, there's so many opinions I have. Let's start with the last piece there. Doesn't it seem like since COVID, like, we're getting the declaration of emergency like over anything anymore, right? Just bam. Something bad is going to happen or might happen or just happen. Bam, state of emergency, all new powers to the government. Oh, there's so many things to talk about on that.
I stubbed my toe. Declaration, state of emergency declared. Okay, that's it.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Yeah, we need
to
access
get that federal government money, guys. That federal government money. You got to get that. You got to keep it flowing in. It's like a competition among the states, right? Like, who can claim the most federal government emergency money this month?
There's no limit on these emergencies, and I'm like, how is this not, kind of factored in when we're building these constitutions, these state and federal constitutions? we could just do these endless emergencies. California is still in a state of emergency over COVID 3 years later. So I mean, it's endless. They just rubber stamp the renewal. I'm sorry, but this we could go into this rabbit hole for a while, but I mean, there's no end to it. I'm like, how did we not factor that in? Maybe there just should be an automatic end, unless the enemy is literally at the gate. No more state of emergency. But some of the other things, I think. Now we'll just stay at the politics. I think the green energy crew is putting so much pressure on anybody, any oil refiner, anyone in the fossil fuel space, and this is coming from government agencies and special groups, special interest groups. I just think like it's not just a profit motive when it comes to why things are breaking down, or like I don't think they're doing it intentionally. I actually kind of feel sorry for anybody in the fossil fuel space right now, because I think in Colorado, California, a lot of other states with certain political leanings, it seems like that kind of thing is happening more often than not. I know California is getting a lot of their electricity from Wyoming and other places adjacent to it, because they keep shutting down fossil fuel plants.
Don't get me started, Matt. Right? We need all these electrical vehicles. Right? We need all the vehicles to run on electric. We also don't want to burn any coal in the state to make power. So let's burn all the coal in Wyoming, and then let's experience the transmission losses from Wyoming to actually get the power to California to charge the cars. Right? I mean, power loss along the transmission line or energy loss is quite significant over long distances. But as long as the coal's not burned in the state of California, everything's cool.
Right. We'll feel good about ourselves.
The current state.
Right.
Yeah. We don't actually have the plant here, but secretly we're trucking that in from other states. And I just want to make sure
California has significantly reduced our air pollution. Yeah, all you did was move the pollution to another state, guys. I don't know how this whole CO2 global warming thing works, but I don't think it matters if it comes from California or Wyoming.
But of course, nuclear energy is not an option, right? So
No.
I just want to make sure I mention that, because anybody listening to this podcast, I think most of our listeners would probably be pounding on the table, like or the dashboard as they're listening, thinking like, you got to mention this whole like climate change stuff that's going on, and the political pressure being put on the refineries and power production plants, those types of facilities. So just thought I'd throw that out there.
The concern, though, is that essentially refineries are losing in the court of public opinion somewhat, right? They're not favorable in that aspect. And so it's like, if it almost seems like a win-win for the refinery. It's like, hey, we get to shut down, we get to enjoy higher profits because all the people in Colorado are still going to buy it. And on top of that, we get to declare a state of emergency. So that's maybe potentially some kind of federal money coming in. And on top of that, hey, we look good like we're some kind of a green energy company because we shut down one bad refinery. Okay, that's fair. But Matt, I know like we've kind of gone down the rabbit hole of like all bad news. It's not all bad news, Matt. I know you kept tabs on CES. What did you see there?
Yeah, so we've been talking about autonomous for what seems like probably a decade now, autonomous vehicles. But I know that I saw, that at CES that autonomous trucking is now making a big splash. So I think, it's interesting just because it seems like trucking is leading the way on this front now. They thought that maybe they would tackle it with the passenger vehicle space. Hey, you can have your own personal conveyance, have a few beers, get carted over to the game and back. You don't have to worry about it, that kind of thing. But I think we're so many years away from that, whereas maybe autonomous level 4 in commercial vehicles is getting a lot closer, right? And so it's probably time that technology, we're in kind of this space. I'm thinking, we're probably doing a lot of overlapping things with these autonomous vehicle groups, that they're trying to understand how carriers are, more efficiently trying to move product and do their jobs, and we're trying to do the same thing, right? And should we now be working hand in hand as this future starts to come into fruition? I know that you kind of worry about that because drivers are concerned that might start to impact, their opportunities. But I actually think it's just going to be an evolution of the driver role, right? And I think we've kind of talked about this too, but basically now a driver might be more the manager of a vehicle or a group of vehicles that are just kind of spitballing things here, right? Where they're not, their task, the primary task isn't operating that vehicle every second that it's moving, but making sure that, the product's getting to where it's got to go, et cetera. So
Interesting.
I think it's
Yeah,
interesting. I think it's a good thing. It's good development over time here. But yeah, go ahead,
I
Flint.
agree with that. I agree with that sentiment, Matt. And I think if you think about where this autonomous vehicle stuff is going, I think it actually gets rid of the bad parts of being a truck driver, like the time away from home, out on the road for 10 days, 7, 10 hours at a time of just keeping it in the right lane, going down the highway at 65 miles an hour. I think what you're going to see is kind of what you're saying, Matt. Like, one, the driver's job gets a lot easier if the truck can do some of this stuff on its own. But I still think we're a really long way off from turning an autonomous truck loose in an urban area to make pickups and deliveries. So I think what we're going to see is that the driver's job gets a lot easier. Perhaps more drivers get home every night, and the driver's actually doing higher value work every day than just holding the steering wheel, keeping it in the right.
Right. Yeah, it'll be a slow evolution. And like, dude, honestly, by all accounts, trucks are so like, they're so stuck in the previous decade. Like, they don't have any like lane departure warning, not even assist lane departure warning. Some of the newest ones do, but it's like they have very basic cruise control, not even adaptive cruise control. And like, by all accounts, it's nice to see that finally there's some advancement there. But I have a personal interest in like autonomous trucks and cutting edge of technology. A quick side note: is it just me, or there's like way less going on at CES now? I used to be like a hardcore like, dude, CES is coming in the beginning of the year. This is so exciting, all the latest and greatest. But it seemed like this year was a little bit underreported, not as much activity. I know this is the first one post COVID and whatnot in 2020, shutdowns and cancellations. So, Matt, did you can you say anything about that? Like, did you notice like that it was a little bit slower in the general news cycle?
Yeah, I mean, I used to follow CES for the video game releases mostly. Now, not as much of a priority for me. So,
right.
I didn't. Yeah, I don't know. That's an interesting thought. I don't know if is technology slowing down, or are we running out of things to invent here? I don't know.
Right. It's
I know that's
law.
not true, but I'm just trying to roll with your thought there. I'm not sure. I really get into a deep dive into CES. I just think it's cool that, I mean, it's great that trucking now is leading the way. I mean, when I started in this industry, it was always kind of like, hey, we're stuck in the 60s and 70s, Smokey and the Bandit. That's like the vibe that I kind of got into this industry in. And now we're leading the way in so many different types of technologies, like, computer vision is one of the very first commercial applications. It's part of what TruckSpy does, right? And so computer vision, all sorts of things that are really leading the way in all sorts of industries in terms of commercial actual application of new technology. So
yeah, but
I think there's going to
necessity
be a
is the
big
mother of
opportunity.
invention, right?
Yeah.
I mean, necessity is the mother of invention. So, like, if you look at this industry, there's been a lot of challenges over the last, let's call it a decade, right, Matt? So, I mean, what you're saying is exactly right. Like, a lot of this, like, trucking is now kind of at the forefront of all this stuff because it kind of needs it, right?
Mm-hmm.
To keep being competitive and keep getting the goods delivered and keeping drivers safe and keeping the public safe and all of this stuff. So it's a really good thing.
Yeah, I think everyone's they're noticing that trucking really is the backbone of the entire economy, and it's actually growing. That was the other interesting part in the article, is saying well over 70% now of all goods that are being transported are done in trucking, and that number keeps growing. So autonomous various levels of autonomous vehicles will help scale these operations up to meet the demand.
Right. And just to add to that, like I forget what podcast I heard it on. I think it was Andre Karpathy, who's like basically the godfather of autonomous vehicles. I think I watched him on a pod. He said like the federal government awarded a contract for self-driving military vehicles in 1996. That was when the first government awarded for self-driving vehicles on the battlefield in 1996. So and because that award came out, essentially a bunch of companies started thinking like, oh, you know, it would be great to go into self-driving and autonomy. So it's certainly been you know, well into 2 decades now that like autonomy has been in the works. But like you mentioned, Flint, it's like, yeah, it's like, do I really need a self-driving personal vehicle? Like, no, I just care about, just give me the cheapest vehicle that I can afford. Like, I don't really, you know, I don't really care. But in trucking, it's like you need it. It's like a driver does get drowsy after 6.5 hours of 65 miles an hour of just holding the wheel, because a lot of that middle road, a lot of those transit is just mundane, boring. So it does make sense on one hand that autonomous trucks are leading the
Yeah.
path. What
Right. I
I've
mean,
heard,
there's
though,
still going to be a human behind the wheel. I
right,
mean,
right,
for the next couple decades at least, right? So we're
right,
really just talking about. It's kind of like just no different now. It's becoming like this, like a commercial airline, right? I mean, the pilot's probably not every second trying to maintain the stabilization of that vehicle. It's very automated, right? It's very computer guided. So that's probably where commercial truck and commercial vehicles are going to go as well.
right. And just to
That
add to
direction.
that, like I talked a little bit with an individual from Plus.ai. They're working on level 2 autonomy, which is like, you know, fancy cruise control or like adaptive cruise control. And he explained, one of the guys there at Plus.ai, he explained that the main reason why level 4 is nowhere in the future is because many states already have legislation against level 4. So we like, it's very unlikely we will have a driver out truck on the road anytime soon. So I think on that disappointment, I think that's going to be the, you know, the end of the show. You know, guys, I think this is a good one. Thanks for everyone to tuning in on the weekly rant from Alex, Matt, and Flint. No, we're kidding.
Yeah, it's going to turn into that. I guarantee. If I'm on this podcast, it will turn into some rants.
No,
I mean,
dude,
I didn't even really get going on global warming and stuff. I mean, I could
right.
rant. I could rant all day.
Barely
really
got started.
We barely
Right.
scratched the surface. I
Right,
promise.
but still, there's a lot of technology that is certainly improving the industry. There's a lot of advancements happening, and you know, I think the goal would be, you know, to highlight some of those key things, while, you know, maybe showing how, you know, some challenges can be overcome, you know, for motor carriers. So things to look out for and ways for motor carriers to improve. Essentially, I think would be the goal. But awesome, thanks, guys.